clerk will read out the names.
Hello and welcome to Parliament and Governance here on Independent Television. We're in Benin City, in Nigeria. I'm Uyi Agmofwegbe. On the show, we want to look at the impacts of legislation on constituents. All right, because we understand that when people are elected to go to the National Assembly, to the State House of Assembly, or even to the local legislative arm of government, the whole idea is for them to make impact, bring some level of measurable practical value to the people they say they represent. But in most cases, there are questions as to what the quality of representation, I should say, has been at whatever level it is. All right, and then again, the credibility and capacity of those who have been so elected to represent their people across the board. We have heard of stories, sadly, of representatives who do not even have, as it were, constituency offices in the same constituencies that they represent. For instance, how does this sound to understand that somebody who has been elected from a particular senatorial district in any state at all in this country does not have an office that sort of creates or provides an interface between him or her and the people they represent? All they do is to, for example, at the federal level, just stay in Abuja and call the shots. From there, how much of representation does that, as it were, provide ultimately? And then you talk about interface. That's part of representation where you have to have an engagement with the people, whether it's by way of town hall meetings, by way of calling a part of the people, I mean, maybe a number of them, maybe a group of them, to say, look, let's brainstorm on the way forward in education, in health, in infrastructure, in whatever it is, just by way of ensuring that all of those electionary promises that you made as a representative, all right, are fulfilled. Those are some of the issues we want to interrogate on the program this week. We'll be back in a minute, and then you'll meet my guest. Quickly, let's meet my guest on the program this week, Christopher Jekiri. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Here with us. I can't put a finger on the intensity of your passion when it comes to quality representation. But one thing I do know for a fact is that you are also often disappointed as to the reality we have along this line vis-a-vis what the ideal should have been. When you look at representation today, or if you like, representative governments as we have it today, how impressed or otherwise are you?
I would like to start by saying that representation as it concerns government in a democratic setting in Nigeria is on 3 levels. In the local government level, you're supposed to be represented by your councillors. You'll be representing the wards.
Right.
At the state level, you're supposed to be represented by your state legislators. And at the federal level, you're supposed to be represented by the federal legislators. Ask one of them, especially those at the federal, what are those agreements? What are those agenda that they sat down with their constituents to articulate and then to list out that they took to Abuja, and you won't find one. What you find before they resume in Abuja is politicking. And we're going to come back to the processes. Now, it's politicking. So the man is going there to Abuja to actually represent himself. That is the understanding. Because what is supposed to be the ideal thing is that as he is asking the people to vote for him to be their representative, he's at the same time asking them to sit down with him, his constituents, from whatever constituency he's representing, to sit down with him, and they are articulating the agenda, the needs, the aspirations, the desires of that constituency together. He is not going there to represent himself, he's going there to represent the constituency. He doesn't have any agenda as an individual. He has an agenda subsumed into the collective agenda of the constituency. And that is the agenda he's supposed to take there to the National Assembly, to the State Assembly, or to the Legislative Council in the local government area, to pursue and to articulate on behalf of his people. And to the extent to which he's getting that, those agenda, attention to those agenda, and then items in those agenda being implemented by the government, to that extent to which he is a success. And to the extent to which he's unable to do that, his constituents will be able to see that he has presented the agenda. He has pursued the argument to a logical conclusion, but that the government of the day is not listening. And to that extent, he's exonerated. And they will say, okay, look, he's representing us well. He has not failed to articulate our agenda before the space. It's just that he has not got attention that he should get. Right. So representation does not mean that you go to Abuja or wherever to represent yourself. If you ask any of them, what they do is that they go there blank. And in the House of Assembly or in the Federal House of Assembly, they look at the trends of the so-called leadership of the House and the politics of the day and the influence from the executive of the day. And then they follow that trend. And that's why some of them can deny their constituencies, even in public debates where they are before the whole view of the world. They are denying their constituencies because they are looking at the dominant mentality and the dominant sentiment, political sentiment of the day. Right. And that's what they're actually representing, or they're representing their own agendas in the constituency project, which they have pursued to a logical conclusion, or other things that will favor them as a person. Now, can you imagine a situation where you say you are a legislator representing the people and you don't have an office to interface? Now, you don't only need to have an office, you should have a timetable of when you come back to get feedback from your constituents on how well they think you are representing them, and to give to your constituents feedback on what are the issues as it affects the constituency, whether in the local government, state, or federal level, as it affects them. So they are carried along, and that is also a channel of political education. It's a channel of political enlightenment, because as the constituents are being told how government work and why this project and that project has to wait till the next appropriation, and why this one will be done now, and what relevance this one has to you and not to your education, to your social well-being, to your health well-being. The people are having political acculturation. They are being educated, and that now is making democracy to deepen. They don't have such things going on. So what we have is a situation where they go to wherever they go to blank, and then they are representing the government of the day.
When you look at the system today,
yes.
I've listened to people both on air and off who talk about, look, for them, by their own assessment, military governments did the country way more good than democracy is doing. But again, on the other hand, you have those who say, look, let's not be in a hurry. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've only been here since 1999. It's too early to start drawing conclusions. What are your sentiments?
It's a very dicey situation to ask a Democrat.
Right.
Because it is facts contesting against sentiments. Because if you begin to speak the facts, it will look like you are putting your stamp on military dictatorship or military government, which, by every standard of civilized governance this day in the world, it's abhorrent, because they are not trained, as it were, for governance. But you can't take away the facts of what the military did or had done when they were there. For instance, we are talking about restructuring in Nigeria. It was the military that has restructured Nigeria to the point at which we are restructured today. It was the military that created the first 12 states, that was moved to the 19 states, that was moved to the 30 states, and that was moved to the 36 states that we have today in Nigeria. It is the military that created the 774 local government that we have in Nigeria. It was Babangida that actually moved it to 774. I can't tell the progression, but it was the military that took it from 600 and something for its side from 400 and something. That's democratization. Breaking down the country into units. The argument is there that they are breaking down this country into units so that you won't have strong, sub-regional base to be able to go against them. But it still doesn't take away from the fact that you are breaking the country to smaller units of administration. That the local government, if they were functioning, will bring government closer to the people and will be able to administrate the people more properly. So it is the military that achieved all of this. What has democracy achieved since they came in since 1999? Except arguments and personal aggrandizement and personal interest, pursuits and power play and power war and all sorts of things. So it is difficult difficult to argue in practice in Nigeria that we have had it better. Because now, I tell you, I'll give you an example. During the military era, the military regimes were accused of being corrupt. But the military is structured in such a way that it's only the chief executive that could really be corrupt. Because it is he that has the supreme power, so to speak, over the state. He ruled by decrees and edicts.
Yeah.
And so he puts a charm on all appointed, because others are not elected, or appointed public officers. And so he's the only one that controls the flow of the money. But in the democracy or in the civilian system we have had since 1999, you have a huge number of councillors in the local government, you have the local government executive itself, you have the state assembly, you have the state executive themselves, you have the federal assembly, you have the federal executive themselves. Each of them, every single one, corrupt. Every single one making and taking from the same purse. And that is why we find that rather than democracy to have enriched our economy, rather than them to have created more jobs, develop, okay, look at the roads. The entire roads, all the federal roads in the country were done during the military regime.
Right.
Are you talking of all the mainland bridge in Lagos? Are you talking of the East-West Road? Are you talking of the North-West, North-South-West Road, the one that runs from here, Abuja to Benin and then Benin to Lagos? It's all done by the military. All the huge bridge is all done by the military. We have built the second Niger Bridge forever since the civilian regime. I dare say if it was the military government that have been there for 16, 17 years now and had made a promise to build the second Niger Bridge to be complete by now. So it is very difficult to push in practice, in theory, in other places of the world, in practice or in other places of the world, we've seen democracy work. And that is because institutions are respected, the rule of law is respected, the populace is enlightened to pursue for all this and to push for all of this. Now, but here, we don't seem ripe enough for the kind of elitist governance system that we have decided to import, but which we have refused to study, neither imbibe, nor trained ourselves on. So that is why we have the problem that we're having. So you don't have a situation where you actually have the tenets of democracy being allowed to play out. And we're having all these problems that we're having.
Okay, people get concerned most times and they say, look, is it not possible we take a second look at the system of governance that we have right now? People say, okay, well, we say it's American. A presidential system of government. We need to make it presidential. After all, that's what America practices. We're trying to domesticate and so on and so forth. But others are saying, hold on a second, is it not possible for us to look inwards and look at something more pragmatic, something more homegrown that we can adopt and going forward be able to push governance in such a way that it is more of something peculiar to our environment? Is that realistic in terms of the argument?
Let me give you some analogy, and I hope you'll be able to, my viewers will be able to understand this. Now, let me tell you, I just picked 3 sectors. I picked the private sector. Let me pick the private educational sector, and then public schools. Now, we have public schools in Nigeria that were functioning very well. Before public school all broke down. Since this broke down, nobody has sat down to even admit that public schools have broken down. Now, we now have private schools coming up. We have private schools that started, they were a mockery, they were shambolic, and then there was criticism. But the private school proprietors, because it was a private concern that needed profit, worked at it and kept working at it. And today, and what were they doing? Exactly what you say we should do in the country. They sit down, they'll rejig, they'll organize, until they decide to understand, look, if we have to survive, if we have to compete with the public schools that we have, if we have to surpass them, that's bringing innovation, technologies, teacher training, and all of that. And today you have private schools that are producing excellent individuals. The public schools are still going moribund. And now if you go to the banks, every corporate organization does that. That is what management teaches. You sit down and then you rejig. You sit down and then you develop new templates. You sit down and you know that you are in a competitive environment. You have to rejig. Now, why are we not able to do that as a country? It's a system of government. And then no system of government came from heaven. The older civilizations, if you go to the Bible, which is about the older civilization, in Egypt, Pharaoh didn't run the system of government. But as far back as that time, they had iron chariots There was technology. The catacombs that were built in Egypt, that's the best engineering the world has ever seen. What you call the pyramids. Up till now, they are there. So now, that was a government. It evolved from the people. Evolutionary governance is what works. We have democracy in the global north because of their liberalism. And so it just suddenly came, it just naturally came from their nature. Now here, we have our own system of government. Before we ever had contact with any civilization, we had the traditional monarchical system of government. There is no system of government that cannot be improved, modified, refined, until it now starts to serve the generality of the people and give us, public good. So Nigerians, we are educated, we are still Nigerians. We have not lost complete trace of our history. We know our evolution, we know our involvement. Yeah. Why can't we sit down? Why have we refused to use our brain to think? Families do that. Corporate organizations do that. What do you call it? Schools do that. Why can't a nation do that? Why can't a state start, for instance? Why can't we allow that? To say, okay, and that's what, you see, those who are even clamoring for restructuring, this is close. It's the same last of what we're trying to say now. That, look, let us sit down and rejig our system and then restructure. It might get to the point where we say, okay, look, let's allow, like what we're advocating, allow political parties. You can't even allow political parties to take their own decisions. You want to have this unitary mentality across board. In a
so-called presidential
system where you have federating units, so that once you make the mistake at the top, that mistake is now bound by consequence. It's inevitable that it will spiral down to the very bottom. So why don't you create systems where if you make one mistake here, it can be corrected here? And that's why you allow for freedom of choice and freedom of systems. So we can sit down and do that if we are serious and willing. We are just a lazy people. Or those at the helm of affairs are lazy. And I tell you why. Because we still have this rentier system where we draw over surplus. That is why we are saying if we have restructuring, where people have to now fend for their states and their regions, depending on the restructuring, creativity is going to be unleashed. Because necessity is the mother of invention. Until there is necessity, there won't be any inventiveness. So we have to get to that point where free money won't be coming. And that's what I thought the South's unity should have brought. Because the South are the ones actually spoiling the country. The resources are flowing from here, and resources is going there to the north, and it's being redistributed there. And you just have so many lazy fat cats over there at the federal level. You find people who do nothing at all. They are multi-millionaires. They're just leeching on the government. Their uncle is a minister. This one is so they are hanging around. They are never do worse, hanging around the minister. When you are coming, what do you want? I'll talk to the minister for it's my brother. And they go in, and then they bring out the contract and say, look, the contract is 600 million. Write it on the paper. You write it on the paper. By the time you are giving the paper to sign, it's 900 million. You say, well, they say, you have your 600. Then what's your business about the other 300 million? So that's what is going on in the country, because there's too much free money and it's not coming from any productive sector. That's why we're not thinking. That's why we're not knowing that we have to sit down and begin to think of the future. The money is still flowing. So we need to do that if we are going to ever have any headway in this country.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about headway on the program quickly right after this break. Everyone stay with us. We're back shortly. So I want to talk to you about making headway. Let's bring the people element into the narrative. People elect representatives. The good book says, you made reference to that already a while ago, of how that's like a priest, like a people. All right, is it not possible? People have argued that the leaders that we have, whether at the executive or the legislative or judiciary levels, are all members of the public first. They are all Nigerians first before they get to hold any position. Is the leadership in the country not reflective of how the people think generally?
It is reflective not just of how we think generally. It is fearful that it could be reflective of how we are.
In essence. In
essence. Because you could be recalibrated to think differently. But if in essence you are in a particular way, you always go back to that. No, so my worry, because I studied literature and English language, and I know that there was a theory developed in the West that there is something about the Negro that they call the Negro cruelty. That's innate and inherent. And every time I'm looking at our system, I can't shake off that worrisome conclusion. Because when we saw it then, I was very angry as a young man in school, but I didn't throw it away. I tried to use it to test it as a hypothesis against everything I meet in the society. And I see that element of Negro cruelty, that you have a people who are enemies of their own selves. I'll tell you why. Do you know one of the reasons why our politicians are so corrupt is the harsh realities they have to go through to get themselves elected into position?
The process.
From the people. So I have known politicians who were otherwise nice gentlemen who had a lot of idealism about what they thought they wanted to do. But by the time the system deals with them, after 2 tenure, you find that they become the very opposite of, I mean, some of these gentlemen came from overseas countries to come and settle down and make impact here. And then the first tenure, they spent everything they brought with all the lies and promises. And then at the end of the day, they realized that they have just been taken for a ride and their money gone. And when they complain, they are told, you just came, there were people on the way, don't worry, that was an introduction. Try again. And sometimes they try again, second and sometimes the third time. By the time they are through with them in those 2 or 3 times, those people have become very, very different from who they were. And so when they go there, when they manage to play the hypocrisy and all the leaders' game and they get there, they forget the constituency. So that man is a product of the people. The people have recreated him to become like them. So it is difficult to exonerate the people from all of this. It's just like our policemen. Our policemen, you chance upon certain men, in uniform that behave in such a way that you want to look at him again and say, are you really sure you're a Nigerian policeman? By his attitude and actions. But what he gets paid for that action, eventually as he continues to show that kind of character to different Nigerians, will shock you. So that is the kind of thing that we have. It is a vicious cycle. The people themselves cannot exonerate it. It's so easy for them to sit down there and be criticizing. But the way you take a man through the kind of process I've seen, I've worked with politicians, I've been a political aspirant minder, and so I know what I'm talking about. You want to do birthday, every member of the constituency has a list and the needs they want the politician to fulfill. And you don't do it, you go into the bad books. You could get maligned, they could say all sorts of lies against you just because you did not attend the birthday or you did not give money to do it. So it's the people, it's a problem, and it's a problem that can be cured by enlightenment. It's a problem that can be cured by political and academic education, cognitive enlightenment, intellectual enlightenment, and political enlightenment. They all work together. Because if you have people who have critical minds, they'll be able to think about what is the best good for everyone. And if they're thinking about what's the best good for everyone, they're going to be less demanding of individual interests and of individual needs. And then they are going to be less hostile to those who they think are not meeting their individual needs. So that if you have a performing senator, a performing rep member, who is doing what is for the good of everybody, is supposed to be encouraged along. So we need that education. We need that enlightenment. It's inevitable. We cannot do without that. And we cannot make any progress without it, for that matter.
Oh, I think that's interesting. But just before we're done, I want to ask you something about the process that throws up leaders. You can't take that away. You talked about, for example, how that these persons, for want of better words, get drilled, summoned again, and that the process reinvents them for the wrong reasons, brings out a worse product. Ultimately, is there a chance we can alter all of these, whether within the political parties themselves or beyond the political parties?
We need strong revolutionaries. There are reasons why I support the people I support. I try to look very holistically. There's a reason why I'm supporting Obaseki. I support Obaseki because I see him as a revolutionary symbol. Somebody who is non-conventional.
It takes a lot to pull that off, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And actually seem to hate the kind of conventionality that we have in place. Now, what we need to do, forget whatever other thing you think that he's not achieving or his mistakes you think he's making. What you need to do is to support that form of ideology and revolutionary attitude so that we completely break down the status quo. The status quo is completely is counterproductive. The status quo as we know it, as I know it, for instance, in Edo State before Obaseki came in, is totally counterproductive. You already have a carved out cabal of people where power that have continued to rotate with all the degenerate idea of what governance is. Nothing for the public, nothing for progress. So if you have somebody who trusts himself on the system and is breaking the system apart, a crisis is transition. It's going to transit into something. As we speak today now, the man has rendered the two parties in Edo State cabalist, so to speak. I mean, he was in APC, he scattered.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing for me. The people think it's a bad thing, it's a good thing for me. You're talking of the status quo. The status quo is a compromise arrangement. That was not counterproductive.
I think the status quo in itself is a whole lot of conversation.
It's a problem itself.
Hopefully we will have the governor here one of these days for an exclusive conversation on some of these issues and how he has found the courage to also alter the status quo as we know.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Christopher Jacob,
Thank you
for joining us on the program. That's what we're leaving it on Parliament and Governance. I am Uyi Agumofwegbe. Have a great day ahead of you.